I want all of you to take a moment, and I want you to think about the most memorable learning experience you ever had in your whole life. Whether it's as an adult or a student, I want you to think, just really reflect. If I was just asked to say, give me that learning experience that you will never forget for the rest of your life, what was it? You got it in your head? Now, there hasn't been a lot of research done on this, but I have some hypotheses about the nature of that memorable learning experience. I'm willing to bet it wasn't the usual routine. It was probably not a workbook page. It probably was not a textbook activity, or probably not driven directly from a textbook. I would be willing to bet that it is something that has made a meaningful personal connection to who you are. And it might have even had an aha moment for you, something that really caused your life to move in a different direction, but something that really connected personally to who you are as a learner. There's likely some aspect of that activity that made a connection outside of a classroom. It might have had some aspects in the classroom, but there's probably something that moved you beyond that classroom. It may have motivated or inspired you to do a lot more than the minimum requirements. It's as if it went beyond just meeting the assignment to something you wanted to do. And you owned it, you made it your own. And you may have even had to learn some additional skills in order to meet the goal that you had all of a sudden set for your own learning. It is highly likely that it tapped into your higher order thinking, your critical thinking, and your creativity. And I'd be willing to bet, because you remember it, that learning has been sustained over time, and it may have been life-changing. How do we bring those kinds of experiences to our students? Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to feel that way every day, but at periods of time in their educational experience each year, they tap into that incredibly memorable experience. We're very fortunate to live in a community that values education and our culture that we have in this community. It defines who we are, and we're proud of it. I was so proud when this community voted the additional 1 mil at a time everyone said it can't be done. During these economic times, I never doubted for a minute this community would step forward, because we are a community that values education. We are a community that appreciates what we have here, and we know we're working together to accomplish that, and that includes the resources that it takes to make those accomplishments. But I feel an incredible responsibility with that trust, because this community says we value you enough to reach into our funds, our resources, through our taxes. But then we expect the highest level of educational experience. And I think that pledge is one that you should feel as well, because I think as a community, we have to work together. So together, we have to feel that accountability for those additional resources and how we use them. So it is of utmost importance that we think about this activity. It's not just about learning what we're doing in the school district and making some mini-type projects. It's really thinking as a community, how can we transform what's happening in our classrooms and utilize not just the resources, but the thinking minds that you represent in this room. The Patterson Foundation research has identified 55 organizations that have K-12 programs, including 26 arts organizations and 10 science, history, and environmental organizations that already are prepared to partner with us. And many of you are represented in this room today. It is encouraging of the track record we have, because frankly, we're not starting from ground level. We have a long track record of relationships that we can build upon. You together have many partnerships that really have served this community well. So we've got some of the work already accomplished. Now, how can we define that working relationship in such a way that it truly transforms what happens with our students? And I really challenge you to think beyond only those typical past ways of doing things. Not that we can discount that totally, because I will tell you, there's a place for field trips. Kids need to have that hands-on experience, that to see that violin made a difference in my life. So we don't want to take those experiences away from our students. But I will tell you that that alone will not transform what's happening in the classrooms. We also could certainly choose to just bring in through our technology other ways of making that connection. That can certainly be a part of it, but we have to be so cautious. Technology alone as a tool and just the latest bells and whistles will not transform education. It is clear. We've seen in all the research, you buy the laptop computers. That's not going to be any different in terms of the impact if it's used in the same ways. It's only when you think outside the box and use technology in a way that allows us to do new things, to have new ways of learning, to be able to be open to the new ways of thinking, then you start to see the transformational possibilities. But I will tell you there's lots of risks as we work through those kinds of endeavors. Risks in terms of you're in unknown territory. And sometimes, for example, let me give you an example that I deal with. Joe Benswanger just sent me a neat article talking about the connection to video games and in education, and people beginning to think outside the box of how do you, if you understand what's happening with students incredibly engaged for long periods of time, learning very complex topics in a game environment, what does that mean for school and for educators? Not a whole lot of research is done. And as you can imagine, can be controversial because of some of the ways we feel negatively about some of those video games. And so how do we just say, oh no, we can't do that, but yet cautiously begin to experiment and to understand what's happening with students that allows them to become so engaged and to learn such complex skills in that environment? What does that have to do with what we could change in our own school environment in the classroom and to have that positive impact? And there are some of those pioneers that are really looking at that. There's actually, when you think about your activity that you felt was so memorable, I will tell you that research is beginning to understand that there were chemical changes in your brain that were occurring when you were in the midst of that. Dopamine is elevated. It's as if the brain is saying, we're ready to learn. And I can tell you that impact of whatever occurs in the learning environment when the brain is engaged and ready to learn and excited about learning has a huge impact. That's happening with a lot of the video games. Students are highly elevated to wanting to learn. So how do we capture that understanding and apply it in a way that makes sense? And I only say that as a parallel to what we're asking of you, is to think, how can we use these technology tools, not just for the sake of using the tool, but in a way that engages our students differently? And just let me give you just some off-the-wall kind of examples. Not that there is anything you could implement, but it helps for you to see what I'm really challenging you to think about. Apparently there is an organization that I wasn't aware of that's called the Lemur Foundation that's one of the partners. And this is a scientific installation that is saving lemurs from an extinction in Madagascar by replicating their natural habitat just outside Sarasota. But the environment is too sensitive to allow public access. So let's just think outside the box. How does that organization make a connection that might be really meaningful for students? Well, what if they set up monitoring cameras and recording observation sites that were the 24/7. If they can do it in Big Brothers, I swear, I think they could do it. They could probably do it at that site. And what if we taught some students the science of how you code observation? There's a scientific protocol, and train students that could go online at any time and record and be a part of the science, the networks of data that might actually help this organization to have a better understanding of what lemurs do 24/7. There's a lot of science right now where people are adding their data, and it's just incredible the power of the social networking phenomenon that brings to the table for some scientific endeavors. What if we gave students a little bit of a glimpse of that so that they were not just reviewing or observing the work of others, they were contributing in that pattern, and then analyzing the data. What are the graphs that you could come up with? How can we report our findings? What are the outliers in terms of those observations? Whatever. You see the difference? It's not about just a field trip. It's not even just about, here's a camera, a picture of the lemur group, but it is about engaging our students in an activity that truly is relevant to their own learning and has huge implications in terms of the application of those standards that are written on the wall. I believe there are so many ideas out there. If we allow ourselves to think outside the box and go with the premise there are certain things we want our students to master at the highest level of application. But we know it's very important to engage them and to excite them and to help them see not just the relevance of what they're learning, but the possibilities that might be the memorable experience that made that individual student decide, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I love this. I want to go at post-secondary in the area of science. Those life-changing learning opportunities. I know the potential is here because I have great confidence in the capacity of the individuals in this room. If we allow ourselves to think together about how to transform education in a more meaningful, purposeful way, we can make a difference that could redefine not just what's happening here. Because guys, it's scary as we look across this country. There has to be microcosms of change, communities willing to leverage what we have and be the ones to be the pioneers for other communities, to show them the way. So although sometimes that's risky, at the end of the day, we'll be a stronger country for it because we'll never make change with deliverables that I've got to write down in a federal grant application. But we might make change by having a demonstration site of look at the power that can occur when people think beyond the limits of our traditional view of education and work together to totally redefine what teaching and learning is all about. I think we can do it together, and I thank you for being partners in that endeavor.